Power of Copywriting with special guest Jennifer Westbrook on today's episode of the Serve No Master podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by Builderall. They are my favorite all-in-one solution for your online business. Everything you need to start your online business, from landing pages to emails to selling your first products, all without breaking the bank. Find out how Builderall can help you grow your online business at servenomaster.com/Builderall.
Are you tired of dealing with your boss? Do you feel underpaid and underappreciated? If you want to make it online, fire your boss and start living your retirement dreams now, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Serve No Master podcast, where you'll learn how to open new revenue streams and make money while you sleep. Presented live from a tropical island in the South Pacific by best-selling author Jonathan Green. Now, here's your host.
Today we have a really exciting episode. We're going to talk about transitioning from corporate life to learning the power of words and learning how we can actually get clients and freelance or start launching our own projects, all using the written word, which gets me very excited as a writer myself. So I'm so excited. Thank you for being here today, Jennifer. I'd love to know a little bit about your journey, like the moment where you said, I want to take control of my destiny and kind of start doing my own thing.
Yeah, I started out as an attorney. I practiced law for a little over 12 years, and I did antitrust and trade regulation, so totally different from what I do now. And I just got to a point where I started to feel like I really wanted to do my own thing. And I didn't know exactly what that would look like or what, I wanted to do, but it just became this burning desire inside me where it seemed like everywhere I looked, I just saw signs that I should start my own business. And so I just decided, hey, when I get to a point where I feel like I have enough money saved up and I can finance the business and just go out there on my own, I'm just going to do it. And so that's what I decided to do. And, I had been doing writing work in the background for so many years, even before I was an attorney, but I just never really saw the value of it. I didn't realize how I could turn that into a business. It just seemed like something that came naturally to me. And so it took me a while to realize that that was the thing that I was supposed to be doing to help other people grow their business. So eventually I transitioned into full-time copywriting and web design, which I kind of stumbled into because I didn't even ever think I would be a web designer, but I decided, oh, hey, I'm going to start my businesses. I'll just make my own website. And then people started asking me, well, who did your website? And so then I realized, okay, well, I've got something here too. So now I just merge them together and I help people to not only write their copy, but also strategically design their website to optimize that copy.
Now, lawyers charge by blocks of time. I know some law firms it's 15 minutes, some it's 3 minutes. You have to write down what you're doing every 3 minutes, not including bathroom breaks. So it's all about billable hours. Now, as you've transitioned into this type of work, did you start off wanting to bill by the hour or do you do by the project?
I kind of did both in the beginning because I had to sort of feel my way through it. While the billable hour was sometimes tedious as an attorney, there is a lot of value in really documenting your time and seeing, well, how am I spending my time and, what am I getting for that time? So I've always documented my time, even to this day. I keep track of everything I do all day long. And it's not as regimented as when I was an attorney, but it is very helpful to just monitor my own productivity and to help me with pricing. But I started off, I did offer some services hourly. And now I really don't. Now everything is pretty much a package pricing, except for I may have one or two legacy clients that I do certain very specific types of jobs for where I may charge them an hourly rate. But yeah, I don't really charge by the hour anymore, except I do one-day intensives. And, that's a big thing that a lot of people are doing now. But even that's really not an hourly model. You're paying still for a block of time. But some people kind of in their minds, they think it's hourly, but it really is still a package price.
I think you brought up two really important things here that get me excited. The first is that it's much easier to charge by the project because when you're charged by the hour, you get punished for efficiency. If you do 1 hour instead of 2 hours for the same job, you have to either get another client or find more work. And there's this mindset that sometimes we have like, oh, I want to pay for how long it took. And it's like, I want to pay for excellence. And we want to be in that mindset. It gets us the better type of client. And the second thing is one of the biggest failure points for entrepreneurs And when they have a full-time job, they leave that full-time job and they go from having 2 hours a day to 8 hours a day to work, and they don't track their time, and there's massive inefficiency. This is a huge problem, and it's always been a problem in my career, is when you have huge blocks of time, especially if you've hit a financial goal, you're like, oh, I've already made my money for the month. Then you just slack off for the rest of the month. So it's very interesting coming from the world of lawyers that you're so strict with your time. Did you go through a period of time where you had some inefficiencies, or did that strictness keep you steady the whole time?
I would say that the strictness, it kept me very mindful of how I was spending my time, but I still did have inefficiencies because there was so much stuff that I was trying to figure out. And I would spend so much time, in the research hole, trying to learn all the things and take all the classes and do all the courses. And so I did have inefficiencies in the sense that I was looking to so many other people to give me the answers and not trusting myself because I just felt like, well, as a lawyer, you don't do anything before you do research. You research, you find the answer, and then you go from there. And so I was trying to apply that to my business, and that's all fine to a certain degree. But at a certain point, we have to say, okay, this is my vision for my business. This is what I want to do. I'm going to go forward. And if I make a mistake, I'll course correct once I make the mistake. But I can't stay stuck in this research hole forever. So I did have those inefficiencies where I was spending so much time in that, research and, let me go to this person, this expert in this course. But once I realized, that wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go, then I was able to make that correction.
How did you get your first client?
Wow. So my first client, really, I had my first clients before I even had a business because I started doing writing work before I was a copywriter. I did editing work in terms of book editing and academic editing. And so I was doing that back when I was in law school. People just knew that I had an English degree and that I could do that type of work. And so I got my first client without realizing I had my first client. If somebody said, "Hey, I'm writing a book, can you help?" And then they paid me. And so it really started, over probably 25 years ago. And it wasn't until after I left my career in law and I decided, okay, this needs to be its own business, that I formalized it into a business. And so, I guess if you were to say, when did I have my first business, my first client once I officially became a business, then that would be maybe, 2017 or something, right after I decided, hey, let me put up a website and start this. But I guess that question's kind of hard for me because, yeah, I already had clients before I had the business. And sort of the business sort of came about because of the clients that I already had.
So I think you brought up something really interesting, which is a lot of people don't realize they're entrepreneurs. For most of my life, I thought I could never be an entrepreneur. I could never start my own business. And then, because you always hear these stories like, oh, this guy had a lemonade stand at 12 and made $10,000. I'm like, oh, natural born entrepreneur. That's not me. But then I realized I was hustling. Like at summer camp, I would order pizzas and then sell them by the slice for a little profit at 12. And I look back and go, oh, wow, I was an entrepreneur. I thought I was just like a little bit of a sleazeball. And so I always thought, and I started a tutoring agency and I would do a lot of things that people would consider entrepreneurial. And I always thought, no, I'm not an entrepreneur, even though I was running my own business, getting my own clients, making money. So a lot of times we do these things that we don't realize are entrepreneurial. So that's really good that you kind of recognize that as part of your journey. And it is, for most people, it's the first client or the first dollar online. That's the proof that goes from, I think I can make money doing this, to I know I can make money doing this. So that's a very good and interesting journey you have. And often it's just letting people know what you're good at, isn't it? Like people always say to me, Jonathan, how do you get really big ghost clients? I don't advertise it. I don't advertise ghostwriting on my website. I just let people know. And then if they know someone who needs a job, it comes my way. And oftentimes that's all you have to do. But most people were afraid when we're like a new writer. We go, I'm not that good. I don't want to tell anyone in case I fail. And that actually causes the failure. So it sounds like you had a really good mindset. Um, Having been, in another career for so long, do you think that was, if you could go back, you would have started the copywriting journey earlier?
Maybe, but not by very much earlier. I enjoyed my career as an attorney. It's not that I stopped doing that because I didn't love it. I just felt the pull in another direction. And so I feel like the timing of it was right for me. I would say the thing I would do differently is my copywriting and web design business, it wasn't my first business that I started, I went in a totally different direction because I wanted to have like a decompression zone from the law. And so my very first business was a home staging company and if anyone's unfamiliar with that, that's people who come into your house and make it look really good to help market your house when you're trying to sell it. And so I started that company first, and I loved it. And I was still doing writing work too. But even then, I still hadn't made it into a business. And so I think what I would do differently is I probably did the home staging business maybe a couple of years longer than I needed to because I was afraid to fully commit to being a copywriter and web designer. That sort of last couple of years of my staging business where I was juggling both, I should have just said, okay, it's time to put this one to rest and then focus on the thing where I saw the greatest need and where I saw the greatest opportunity to make more of an impact.
A common mistake that people make is overextending their focus. We think, oh, I want to try these 10 different things. The problem is it takes 10 times longer than just doing one. And sometimes, and this just happened to me recently, one of my friends was like, Jonathan, every time you pivot, you always end up doing a ton of writing. Like I've stopped doing ghostwriting, stopped doing book writings. I've written so many books, and now I'm writing tons of blog posts for my blog. And I was like, oh, you're right. Whatever I do, I always fall back to content writing. This varies, no matter what I do, I always end up doing a lot of writing. And I kind of was like, oh, she's right. That is my circle of excellence. And it's the one thing I'm the best at. As we get further and further out of our circle, we're less good at it and we're less valuable. Like, yeah, I can help set up a website, but it's pretty far outside my circle of excellence. And so I would have to charge less, deliver a lower quality product. But sometimes we're tempted. There's this temptation to want to do everything. Like if a client comes to us and says, hey, do you do social media? Do you do text advertising? Do you do web design? Do you do all of these things? And we end up taking on projects that are a mistake. And that certainly has happened to me, where I've taken on a project, especially if I'm late on the rent. I'm like, okay, I'll take that job with that night. And it turns into, sometimes you take a loss. And I did one project where I did the math and I was like, I made $1.17 an hour because it took so much extra time. A 3-week job took 3 months, tons of phone calls. Have you run into that? Like, can you talk about some of the early mistakes you made, whether it was pricing or the types of clients you accepted, or even working with the client that you regretted or had to fire?
Oh, absolutely. Yes to all of that. I and I've done something similar to you where I've done things outside of my zone of excellence, and it's hard whenever you have things like financial pressures. Like, okay, I've got this bill, I've got this bill, I've got these things that I have to pay for in my business and in my personal life. So how dare I say no to somebody who wants to hire me for something, even if I don't want to do it? And so I've made those mistakes. I would definitely call them mistakes because the time, not just the actual time, but also the time in my brain, the energy that it took me to focus on that and not focus on pursuing the right kinds of clients or, getting stronger in an area where I wanted to really focus. That really, I would say, was harmful to me as a business person. And I've had to fire clients who, when I took the project, I didn't want the project. And even though I gave it my all, they just weren't the right client. And it just got to a point where I had to say, hey, for all of these reasons, and by the way, read in my contract where it says I can fire you, you're fired. And that's tough because that's also disappointing to me to have to walk away from somebody after I committed to helping them. So yeah, I've had times where I did a service that somebody asked for it and I did it because they asked, even though it wasn't something I wanted to do. Or a client said, well, no, you did so great at this. Couldn't you also just do that? Or I know you mostly do, website copy, but I really need help with my social media. And, I don't do social media, so it's hard to say no when it's either, hey, I need the money, or hey, I don't want to let this person down who has already put their confidence in me in other areas. But what I've learned is that it's better for everybody to just say no, because what I want for clients is for them to find the person that's right for them, that's going to help them get the results they're looking for, even if that's not me. And so if I say yes to somebody who's not a good fit, I'm keeping them from finding that right person. And that's not what I want for them. And I'm keeping myself from doing the thing that I am most excellent at doing. So yeah, I've made countless mistakes, and sometimes you get somebody who doesn't pay you. There are just so many things. And it's like, well, all the warning signs were there. And so I just should have said no from the beginning. So I've definitely learned the hard way how to say no to the things that aren't right for me. And I'm still having to do it. It's still a struggle because I have clients who, you know, find me and say, oh, well, I want you to just do all these things because you're so great at this. So what else can you do? And I have to be very careful about the what else can I do because sometimes they want things that I'm not comfortable doing. And what I've learned now is, okay, let me try to find people who can do that. So if clients keep saying, well, hey, I really want somebody who does email copywriting. Well, I don't really focus on that right now, but I'm building a network of people who do. So I can say this person is really great. So I'm still giving you access to somebody who's excellent, but I'm not putting that strain on myself.
I think that's really good. A lot of people make this mistake. They think all copywriting is all copywriting. There's writing an email, writing an infomercial, writing a sales video, writing a long form sales page, writing an opt-in page. They're all different. And we often think, oh, copywriter can do everything because we think of it as broad. Recently, someone came and said, oh, someone in my life wants to do video editing. Can you give them some advice? And I said, well, what kind of video editing? Because editing TikToks is not the same as editing a movie or editing documentaries or editing TV. They're all very different. And music video editing is different from commercial editing. And I know people that do those things. So we sometimes get too broad. And that's the thing, is when you're really good at one thing, then you can charge a lot more. Just like when you're a specialist as a doctor, people pay a lot more for the surgeon than for the general practitioner because of the specialty. They can handle less clients, we can charge a lot more. So what are some of the signs that you've now learned that you go, this project is, or this client is not the right fit for me? Kind of like, because sometimes, you know how sometimes you're on that first date with someone and you ignore the red flags because they're so handsome or so cute. I think everyone's guilty of that. And your friends are like, you got to get out of a relationship. It's a nightmare. And a year later, I'm like, oh yeah, you were right. I just wasted a year of my life in a nightmare relationship. But if we're objective, right? It's when we get emotional. So can you tell me some of the red flags that you go, oh, I got to get out of here before they say the number? Because sometimes once you hear that number, you go, well, maybe they're not so bad.
There are quite a few. One red flag that I would examine. I wouldn't say this would definitely rule somebody out. But if one of the first things they tell you is, oh, I had this other person who did this and it just didn't work out, that's usually, not always, but usually that's a red flag if it seems like they have a pattern of not getting along with people. If the common denominator in all of the broken relationships is them, then that is a telltale sign that they are probably not going to be a great client, or the moment they aren't happy with something, it's going to be a disaster. Instead of them trying to work it out with you, they're just going to want to blow up. So that's a big red flag. Another red flag is sometimes when people are a little too specific, and this may sound weird, but if they're too specific about what they want, for example, if they want a web design and they're like, on my homepage, I want this, and this, they may be a little bit too much in the weeds and not willing to work within my process, because my process is much more strategic. So maybe all the things you think you need on your homepage are really not appropriate for what you're trying to accomplish. So if it sounds like they're going to be too much expecting me to be like a waiter where I just take their order and then go in the kitchen and cook it up, I know that's not a good fit for me. I need somebody who's willing to let me be the chef and say, these are the specials of the day. This is what I can offer you in order to get you where you want to go. So is this what you want? So I look for that, someone who doesn't seem like they're open to allowing me to be the guide. Another thing that I look for is somebody who, this is, I think, big for entrepreneurs, if they're looking to try to make me an employee instead of allowing me the space to be an independent contractor, that's a red flag, because sometimes those clients are not respectful of time and don't completely understand, I'm not going to be available to you 24 hours a day like I work for your company. I serve other clients and I want everybody to have the appropriate amount of time and access to me. So that means I work within certain parameters. So I look for people who maybe will try to be a little too controlling of my time and not understanding that I know how much time I need to spend on your project. So let me show you my process instead of you trying to, make me fit into your company as an employee. So those are some of the big red flags. And of course, another big one is if someone right out of the gate is trying to negotiate on price. I don't negotiate on price. I modify the scope of your request. So if my price doesn't fit your comfortable budget, then we can talk about how to modify the scope of what you're asking for so that that can fit within your budget. But anyone who's trying to change my pricing, that's a big red flag.
Yeah, I love the one where they go, "Oh, I need a big discount now because there's going to be a lot of future work." There's never future work. So for me, one of the other red flags, it's like when you get a job and they go, "Oh, around here everyone's family." That's when you know they're going to ask for unpaid overtime. Like it's such a red flag. I think what you said was so good. Those are three of the best answers I've ever heard, which is that you look for someone's history. Like I had a business partner that ended terribly, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've had 5 business partners. They all stole from me, and I'm on my third marriage." I was like, "Oh wow, I guess that's unlucky." I didn't go, "Wait a minute, there's one thing common." I was like, "That's a lot." Like that's a, and he just got married, and a year later he was divorced, and our partnership was broken. So it is a really good question is to ask someone, "Oh, have you worked with a copywriter before? Have you worked with a web designer before? How did it end?" It's kind of like the person who talks really bad about their exes. You know they're going to eventually talk really bad about you. Like, so that's a really good one because we're so busy trying to get the job. We're like, "Oh, the last person failed. Don't worry, I can do better," without realizing maybe the last person was really good. And then I think it's also important to pay attention to pricing. This is a real struggle for new entrepreneurs. They go, "What's my time worth?" And what most people do when they first start out is they charge at their new job whatever they were making at their old job. So if they were working at In-N-Out Burger, they're going, "Oh, I was making $15 an hour, so I charge $15 an hour," even though their expertise is way higher. And this actually repels the best clients. I've had clients come to me and I tell them my price and they go, "Oh, that's so low. You must be terrible." And I went, "What?" And he hung up and I go, "Okay, raise the prices." And that's when I thought my price was, it gives people get sticker shock when I say it. And but there's always someone who's like, "That's so low. You must be terrible," no matter what your number is. Right. And it's very important to figure out your pricing strategy. Now, for me, when I started out, my very first client was $200. The next one I said 500. The next one I said 1,000. So I just kept doubling. And then the next one, he goes, "What's it cost?" I go, 10,000. And I just said it because it was the biggest number I could think of. And I was like, "My top clients pay me 500. Why did I say 10,000? I don't know." And I'm standing there sweating. And he goes, "That's too high. I'll give you 2 grand." And I go, "Deal." Because he just 4X my income. But it's so scary because we want to negotiate against ourselves. The hardest part is the silence where we have to wait for them to go, "Okay, so how did you find the right price for you?"
Oh gosh, I think I found the right price for me when I finally realized that if I kept going the way I was going with my pricing, that I would have to go out of business. It wasn't sustainable. And so I just said, "Okay, well, I'm either going to charge the right prices or I'm just going to quit. So which one is it going to be?" And for me, I just started doing a lot of math. I am a spreadsheets, you know, fanatic. And so I just started looking at all those numbers that I tracked already. My time. How much time did it take me to do this project? How much time did it take me to do that project? And then I started calculating, okay, if I were to get paid by the hour, which of course I don't, but if I did internally, what's my hourly rate? What does it need to be in order for me to make the amount of money I need to make every month, every year? So I just kind of worked backwards from what's my revenue goal? And then what types of projects do I want? And how much would I need to charge per project in order to get to that revenue goal? And then of course I also did research to see, okay, are these prices crazy? Am I totally off my rocker with this? Or is this something that people would expect? And of course I don't base my pricing on anyone else's pricing, but I do want to have an awareness of what's going on in my market so that I know kind of where am I among, other people who I think are good, or is my pricing higher than people who I think are bad? And so I factor all those things in, and that's how I came up with my pricing. And I'm constantly adjusting it. I still, once I finish one project, I reevaluate everything and say, did I get the value that I should have gotten out of this? And if I feel like, I spent, 80 hours on this, but I don't feel like I got enough pay for that, then I'm going to make my pricing higher for the next one. So I'm constantly adjusting pricing.
When you raise your prices, was there a lot of pushback and sticker shock from clients, or were new clients like, oh, this is fine because it was the first price they were hearing, so it seemed okay?
My existing clients, some of them had some pushback because, the pricing was higher than what they were used to. And some of them said, yes, okay, I understand you need to raise pricing. And some said, well, I can't afford that. And that's fine. There are going to be people who say no. A lot of times the people who say no, they come back around later when they realize, hey, I really do want this done and I want you to do it, or they try to get it done elsewhere and they're not happy with their results. And then with new clients, I would say it's the same thing. Some people say, hey, that's out of my budget. And then some people say, okay, yeah, sure, let's go ahead. I find that the people who say no, it's usually because they really just don't have the money, because they'll say, I really want to work with you, but this isn't, I can't afford this right now. And a lot of them come back around at some point, maybe a year later, they'll say, hey, I'm ready to do this. So I know that a lot of times when people say I can't afford it, there's something else going on. Maybe they don't believe that they can do it. They're not sure I can get them the results, or they think I'm the person responsible for the results, which I'm not. They're responsible for the results. So sometimes that is an issue, and I will try to talk people through that just to try to see, is that what's going on? Are there questions I haven't answered that will help you understand, why this price is right and why you shouldn't be afraid of it. But then there's some people who just really don't have the money, and I don't like to push people to spend money that they don't have, because then there's so much more pressure on me. So I like for people to be ready.
That's really good, because dodging bad clients and like figuring out pricing are two of the biggest struggles for any type of freelancer, and especially a copywriter, because sometimes people expect you to have the pricing of an email copywriter when you're a website copywriter, which is not the same as an e-commerce copywriter or an Amazon copywriter. So this has been really, really informative. I appreciate you giving me so much of your time. Where can people visit you online to spend more time with you and learn about what you do, and maybe to start their own copywriting career?
Yeah, so my website is jenwestwriting.com, and that's where you can find out more about me, connect with me, grab any of these that I have available. So I'd love to see you over there.
Okay, guys, that's at jenwestwriting.com. I'll make sure to put it in the show notes and below the video on YouTube. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I do. Copywriting is a passion of mine, and getting started doesn't have to cost a penny. I've put together a collection of some of the greatest ads of all time and some exercises to get you started. You can get my ultimate swipe file right now at surfmaster.com/ultimate.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Serve No Master podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss another episode. We'll be back next week with more tips and tactics on how to escape the rat race. Please take a moment to leave a review at servenomaster.com/iTunes. It helps the show grow, and more listeners means more content for you. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.